What's going on, everyone? I'm still trying to get used to looking into the mic as I do these, but we're getting on the way with a studio setup. I've lost multiple recordings to messing around with technology and things like that, so I think we're getting closer to what maybe the final product would look like. I got a better camera going, which is admittedly just my phone. The mics, easiest thing. Software, cameras, stuff like that. That's where my proficiency kind of goes away. We got some sweet lighting going on in here. We're gonna update the studio as we go. As always, I am Coach John Fazio of Lumos Fitness Collective. I don't know why I'm using intentionally like a radio caster voice, but or like a sleepy time ASMR voice, but it's early in the morning here. Things are pretty chill. It's been a busy week in my life as a coach, and I'm gonna kind of go through what that is, in the sense of, um, I coach competitive CrossFit, for the most part, or I run the compete people here, which is what we just call it, Lumos Compete. It's been a working title for about 4 years now. But my squad has been going pretty hard with qualifiers for the BCS Classic. It is it's technically a charity competition run by the folks over at CrossFit Mayhem. They have a foundation that all the money and proceeds and stuff go to for the competition, for the qualifier, right? It's run like a real competition. The live competition, which is later this year, is done like a real competition. It's a big show out in College Station, which is really cool. It's kind of my first run through, not necessarily taking it seriously, but it hasn't really been on our season calendar for a long time. I've had a couple athletes kind of accidentally qualify for it in the past 2 years. And it's just not, it's an interesting competition in the sense that it's exclusively a partner competition. So every division, elite, RX, masters, whatever, intermediate, rookie, scaled, whatever they call it, depending on where you go, it's always pairs. So there's RX male male, then there's mixed, then there's female female, then same thing for intermediate, same thing for masters, same thing for I'm just going to call it rookie because scaled feels inappropriate. But yeah, so no individual competition, no 4-person teams, no 3-person teams, just pairs, which has been interesting for me. So in the past for me, we've done qualifiers like Wadapalooza or live competitions like TFX, which is 3-person teams for the most part, or individuals. But this is my first time running people through pairs. And what I think they've done for Masters is pretty interesting. In order to qualify to be a Masters team, your total age needs to be 75 or up. So like theoretically, you could have a 50-year-old and a 25-year-old on the same team, which is kind of cool. I'm curious to see if like there's any like big age gap disparity like that, but we'll see. So but yeah, this is my first one. This is my first time running through BCS. In the past, like for us, our main competition is the Fittest Experience. That qualifiers in October, and then the live competition has been at the end of January the following year. So BCS has been kind of new in the sense of like we took it a little more seriously. Now, to give some context, we kind of change, or I should say, I kind of changed up how I coach things for compete. So for years, it was always like, a lot of trying to peak for qualifiers and peak for competitions and stuff like that. And, TFX was our kind of like our Super Bowl every year. That's the one we really went through. And in this year, I've kind of gotten away from it. I've taken a step back and looked at things, and there's two main things that have changed. Um, the first one being I no longer try and peak people. Um, to add a little bit of context to it, we don't have any elite level athletes here. Like, I'm not looking at games qualifiers or stuff like that. We have athletes who are competing at like the RX level at most like larger competitions like a BCS or a fittest experience or even a Wadapalooza, and then like in the intermediate range, and then some folks in the scaled range. So more what I call real folks, people who love competing, people who train day in day out and give their best effort and stuff like that. And a lot of my education comes from the context of like the elite level, which I think is somewhat flawed in design, in which like I don't know, information is given out for courses and things like that, but we're always thinking like getting to the highest level. And then late last year, early this year, I kind of had the notion of like I'm gonna train people to be the best at the level that they are at currently. And that really came from it's hammering skills, getting stronger for weights that are going to be in divisions above us and stuff like that. And then really what happens is, because we're dealing with people who aren't training for a living, we're dealing with people who have jobs and lives and kids and a home and parents and spouses and things like that. I need to get them the best that they are for the level that they plan at competing at. And as a product of that, they're going to move further down that road. And I think that was like a really big discovery I had, mainly because there's a few outings where, we're getting skills and we're getting stronger in a way for divisions we're not even ready yet for. And then because of that, the skills that they were going to need, say if they were in an intermediate level, just weren't as sharp because they were getting overlooked. So I started being like, if we're competing at intermediate, we're going to worry about all the stuff that typically shows up at an intermediate level. If we're competing at an RX, we're going to worry about all the stuff that shows up at an RX level. And I think that's been really big, and I'll dive deeper into that in a second. The second thing is that I stopped trying to peak for competitions. In the past, like, it's very easy to whittle everything down to a date. But what we were kind of falling into as a trap was that, um, people are just getting burnt out by the time competition time came around. You have 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is to lead up to a competition. And I think there's like two things, like the physical burnout, like training, like, starting with a lot of volume, then sharpening everything down, getting into intensity in, the loads we're moving at, the pace at which we're working, the amount of volume that we're doing. You do that for such a long time. And even though like the actual peak is only a couple weeks, I think what ends up happening is not only like the physical stressors get out of the way, but the mental stressors really get up there, in the sense of, and I'm sure if you've done any competing in any capacity, like you get to this point where it's like, gosh, like I am so tired of doing the training part. I just want to get out there and get this over with. And that's not like the headspace you want to be in when you're competing. So what I did was I just switched things up, and now we just run in 4 week blocks consistently, and people will get better over time, and it keeps training fun, it keeps training interesting. It's not so much pressure to always be on, or we have this giant thing. And we found a lot of success in it because it allows us to continually address things and work, and kind of plays into the thing of like, we're working at a level that is appropriate for the athlete more constantly for longer periods of time. And it's kind of hard to explain the effect it's had, because now we everyone's always kind of feeling confident, not because I'm throwing them softballs all the time, but because instead of like starting with lower intensity and working to like very, very high intensity, we're kind of always at that median intensity in the middle, which is very, very workable. Whereas like you are getting the touches you need with all the stuff you need to more often, you're not getting burnt out, and things aren't too easy either. And what that has turned out to be is like, realistically, when we look at competitions and we look at the level that I coach at, or the level of the athletes that I coach is a better way to put that, is that window of intensity and time domain and stuff like that is reflective of what they're normally dealing with. And I think has in turn like left everyone feeling way more prepared. To give an example, like, you know, most of the conditioning pieces or training pieces or skill pieces I give people range between like 9 and 20 minutes, just like roughly give or take a minute on both ends, sometimes a little bit longer, sometimes a little bit shorter. And that's usually what we get dealt with in qualifiers at this level, right? Like we just did the BCS Classic, and every time cap was between 12 and 20 minutes. There was one 20-minute workout, there was two 15-minute workouts, and there was one 12-minute workout. And because of the way we train, everyone now, compared to in the past when we're doing like really short intervals or really long base building stuff, everyone has so much exposure to being in those time domains compared to previously, that people felt way more confident on how to handle that time domain from a pacing standpoint. We've done so much skill stuff, done so many movements in that window, that at different volumes, different set densities, yada, 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 that everyone just felt like this is another workout, you know. And 9 times out of 10, I'm dealing them something that's way more difficult than what's in front of them. So this qualifier specifically was kind of our first touch at a qualifier with these two new like training principles, involved. And it, not to my own surprise, but, or really any surprise, it's hard to say. Like, I knew how in shape everyone was. I guess I didn't know like this was a good read on how in shape everyone really is, because this is by far, I think, the best outing everyone has had with a qualifier. Our 2-person female team took 6 out of like, I don't know, 80 something teams. Our RX team placed in the top 20. Our intermediate mixed teams placed in the top 20, which is really big, considering, again, just to give you a little bit of context, like a decent amount of times, with qualifiers like this, it's just getting in range of the cut line. And then, people get like backfilled in because people say no, or there's injuries, or they were just doing the qualifier for fun. This is the first time where we have a bunch of teams that are like no doubters, right? Like they're not getting backfilled. They made it, which feels like really good for them. I mean, for me as a coach, like, but, and, a couple of the people who have done this competition before were the ones who did it this time, where like when I said they accidentally made it, like that was part of the thing. Like they just did the qualifier, they landed where they landed, and then we got backfilled in, and that was kind of their experience. This time, they're in a top 20 spot, going into that, which I think was a big boost of confidence to see that like all their work is paying off. And the way we decided to do things at the start of this year has really paid off too, which has been really cool to see. And I'm like incredibly proud of everyone for just doing the work, like just coming in here and doing the thing is such a, it seems so simple, but it's such a hard thing when, you know, people have busy lives and busy schedules, and most of the time it's about just like working this into their day, and not only working training into their day, but also like working it into their day that like, oh, we're gonna do something like really hard with this, 2 hours of free time I might have that I would love to give to something else. um so I was just left feeling really proud of everyone. And you know it, qualifiers are so interesting compared to live competition. Live competition, I have a much more active role in, you know, being the strategist and like being observant of the field and letting everyone know where they need to be in certain workouts, and keeping an eye on things, watching heats previously, seeing average times, relaying information. you know that's a much more active thing in live competition. Qualifiers is a little bit different. Qualifiers, I tend to be a little bit more hands off. I'll give my general um like thoughts, and knowing the athletes, thinking about how they should go about it. But overall, I think online in gym online qualifiers are more of the athlete's environment, right? They are more comfortable there. They are more confident there a lot of times. They will, have a better feel for things. And the workouts are usually more closely resemble stuff we've done in the past. And we'll talk about like the workouts they had in just a second and kind of what that looks like. But they, I don't know, I kind of leave it to them. Like they come in on their own schedule a lot of times. Granted, we do a lot of these together. They, especially this time, had their own feelings on how they were going to do things. Some folks would do the workout. We have a great community with our competitors here. We're like immediately like relaying information, like this is how this went, yada yada yada. This is how it broke things up. And they were a little more reliant on each other. Like it's more of I guess that's the best way to put it. Is it's more of a team sport with qualifiers, because some of them are competing against each other technically, I suppose, but the goal is to get everyone in. And when that is the case, it becomes a little bit more of a team sport of like, the competitors could rely on each other based on their similarities, based on what they know they're good at, like this and that. And they kind of help each other get through the qualifiers together, where honestly I feel a little bit useless some of the times, where they seem to have a really good handle on how they feel. And they're like, oh, it was like this training piece that we did, like remember we did this together, like and this is how we ended up breaking things up. And it's like really fun to watch them create their own environment and kind of coach each other through it as a team. And it goes even beyond just doing the workouts, like, helping people with clocks, being there to judge and count reps and this and that. Like, it becomes this whole self-sustaining, there's a word for you, environment. It's very cold in here, and that is why I look like I'm shivering. Um, but yeah, it's just really cool to see, and I get to step back and just watch them be like a unit together, which is really awesome. Uh, live competition's a little bit different, but I'm mostly talking about qualifiers. So that was my experience. Like I got to be very hands off, and it's a testament to them in the sense of like they know themselves so well now and have taken all the information from their preparation and were able to apply it so well that I didn't need to, like, they were able to come up with these strategies on their own that I was going to give them anyway. and that's like the most important thing, is like being able to develop athlete IQ, being able to understand the purpose of your training and grab concepts and being able to apply them live is so hard. Like, not hard, it just requires like paying attention, but so important. And they all did such a great job of like taking their training and making it apply to what they had in front of them. That's really cool, and like that's a concept, and like I've harped on this point a long time, that like it's so compounding in that way of like, I do a training piece, I understand the things that I learned from it, I apply it to the next one, and then that one goes a little bit better. Okay, how could I tweak this one? Okay, bring that into the next one that I do. And then you're just always tweaking and refining and tweaking and refining and paying attention and taking data points. And that is how they develop so well over time, and how athletes could develop so well. Is it's just like, do a workout, understand the point of that workout, take data points from that workout, apply it to your next workout. And you do that over and over and over again. And you get a result like this, where like they absolutely knock it out of the park. And that's not solo to, or what's it? Exclusive. There's a word. I'm trying to understand things. It's not exclusive to, competition. That's a nugget that like anyone who's training in any capacity, whether you're doing group class or, training for competition or whatever, it is, or just life in general. Like, you take every experience and be like, okay, how could I apply it to the next thing? And now we're getting all existential, which I don't need this morning. But that's how you develop as an athlete, and that's how you do it. Not necessarily quickly, but it happens a lot faster than if you're not doing it, right? And it just really, like, it showed more than ever in this qualifier, in the way I watch them attack workouts and approach things and come up with strategy, and the way I didn't really have to do much. I just needed to make sure that, everyone was feeling good and feeling okay. And if they needed anything from me, and that's not to say like, the questions weren't asked and I didn't help people, but I had to do a lot less of it than I normally do, which was really cool. The workouts themselves were really interesting. No offense to Mayhem, but I found the workouts to be boring in a way. I think more as a set, if they were individual workouts that were just done like here and there, I think they're great workouts. But as a set of workouts, I found them to be a little lackluster, and I'll explain why. So we had 4 total workouts. The first one being 15-minute time cap, 15 clean and jerks, 90 wall balls, 15 clean and jerks. And the weights range from 155, 105 to 135, 95 for intermediate masters and stuff like that. So that's event 1. Couplet, kind of a buy-in of clean and jerks. The workout's 90 wall balls, and the buyout's 15 clean and jerks again. Okay, so hang on with me there. Event 2, a 20-minute time cap, 3 rounds, 50 dumbbell snatches, 50 burpee over the dumbbell. Okay. Another couplet, not super heavy, very similar to the last one. Pretty light, just 2 movements. Kind of just seeing what your capacity for like 85% for 20 minutes is. Event 3, 12 minutes, 42, 30, 18, toes to bar, 21, 15, 9, overhead squat. Prescribed at 115, 80 for RX, 95-65 for intermediate. Again, couplet, high volume across all of these. We're talking, huge set density in the first one, big set density in the second one, big set density in the third one, couplet. Like, the themes of just like a lot of reps and a couplet at like light to moderate load. It just played all the way through. Last workout, 1,000-meter row, 50,000-meter row buy-in, 50 bench press, 1,000-meter row buy out, 15-minute time cap. Like I said, like all these workouts are fun to do on their own. But if we're trying to test athletes and see how complete they are as athletes, I don't know if it does it, because I did all of these workouts and I can speak from personal experience. They all kind of felt the same. You know, it was just like, okay, we're going to do a lot of reps for 15 minutes. And it was basically came down to like who could break it up the smartest. And that might be like, you know, I'm being reductive in a way, but every workout is a high volume, high set density couplet at moderate to light load for 15 to 20 minutes, basically. And like I said, great workouts. Like, I thought they were fun to do. I don't know if I felt like all my faculties were tested. Like, there's nothing heavy. There was no upper body pulling gymnastics. And to add some context, it's like the laundry list of weights and skills that were given to us that we should be prepared for in the sorry, I'm blanking out on here. In the division expectations, like intermediate, they're like, you should have chest to bar and handstand walking and be able to do weights, this and that, and the next thing. And then RX, like, you got handstand walking, muscle ups, heavier barbells. Again, like, these are the expectations they set. And then they put out these workouts that are like, they're fine workouts, but they weren't reflective of what we were told was coming. So when like the only gymnastic movement across 4 workouts is toes to bar, I was like, okay, I guess. You know, and don't get me wrong, I love toes to bar. Toes to bar rule. It's like my favorite movement. But I'm more curious to see like what the live competition is going to look like. Like, is that where we're going to see all these things that were like foretold to us? And you know, like, and I think it's kind of like an old schooly CrossFit. It's like just like pure work capacity. Like, how much work can you do in a time domain? How many reps of this thing can you do in a given time domain? Which is great. But I really feel like the only thing that was tested here was capacity. I don't think a lot of skill was tested here. I don't think a lot of strength was tested here. I think like capacity was tested here, and I don't think we need 4 tests to do that. Like, if you want to test capacity, like, make them simpler. Make them easier. Make them all like, you could just do that one dumbbell snatch, burpee over dumbbell workout and kind of figure out who's got the best capacity. The only one that sits outside of that is maybe like the toes to bar one, because you need to be good at toe. You did 90 toes to bar in 12 minutes if you finished. So you need to basically be like, okay, again, it's like, what's your toes to bar capacity? Like, you know, what I'm looking for is like, and they were all couplets, which like are fine. I love couplets. Like, couplets are great, but there's so much more creativity you could put within a more complex workout that is going to test skills and strength and things like that, and still make it a metcon. Like, I'm not asking them to put like a 1 rep max clean in there, but like, you know, put a workout in there that's going to test like you be strong while expressing capacity. Like, you know, row, heavy squat clean, something like whatever it is, but just like give me something a little bit more than just like, okay, the movements are like kind of non-complementary. Can you do a lot of them in like this window? Okay, now can you do a lot of them in like a much larger window? And can you do a lot of them in a little bit shorter window? And I'm not knocking, like, competitions are hard to run. I get it. This charity competition, and like, they're just trying to get, like, the goal is to get people to sign up with money so that they could raise money for this charity. And like, I 100% respect that. But in years past, the workouts have been a lot more interesting. And that's where my confusion from this year came from. And a little bit of like, where I was talking about like changing up all this training, like selfishly, I wanted my athletes to be tested more than they were. Like, they're fit. I know their capacity is there. Like, and that was cool to see. It was awesome to see them like absolutely decimate some of these workouts. Like, it was really cool. But I also wanted to give them the ability to flex a little bit more of like stuff they've been working on and skills we've been shoring up, and like, the strength and other modalities and things like that. So that's just me being selfish, I guess. And like, it was a fun qualifier, but my only knock on it is like, it was a little boring as far as like a set of workouts. Like I keep saying, like, single workouts, these are fun workouts. Like, there's a few that I would love to do again, like a year from now or something, or retest later on, because I really enjoyed them. But as a set meant to test a complete athlete, because that's what CrossFit is. Like, we are supposed to be able to, do many different things over many different domains in many different ways, and this felt like we were testing like one thing the entire time. That's where I felt a little bit like there were some shortcomings, but like I said, it was so fun. I'm curious. I'm super curious to see now what the live competition is, because to give a little bit of background here, a lot of times qualifiers don't reflect what the actual live competition is. Like TFX qualifiers, like raw, pure CrossFit in its most beautiful way. Like the qualifier workouts are always super interesting, like diverse CrossFit workouts. And then the live competition is not that. It's a lot of like odd object stuff. You get like a run, carry, something. There's always like a sandbag thing. There's max lift usually, but it's like really obscure in a way. Like last year was the first year where it was just like max snatch, and I was shocked. Years past, it's been like 4 rep max shoulder overhead from the ground, like a lot of, and then like we're doing jump ropes with like cut off like rope climb ropes, and then there's always like the raw CrossFit stuff. And I know why they do this. I'm explaining this, that the raw, like more pure CrossFit stuff is like very, very short. And usually back to back. Like it'll be like 1 8-minute workout and then like 5 minutes rest, and then like a 5-minute workout. So the amount of time you're actually doing CrossFit is like very short. And I know why they do it. It's like because that's the amount of people that go to TFX as competitors and are competing over that weekend. It is an insane amount of organizing and an insane amount of equipment needed to run. So then they move to stuff that is easier to organize and requires less equipment and things like that, which I totally respect. But, I've come to learn as coaching athletes in it for many years now, it's like, you got to get CrossFit ready for the qualifier, and then you just have to get like a more general fitness ready for the actual competition, which is fine. Like, I don't mind doing that. But BCS stays pretty true to classic CrossFit, so I'm curious to see what that is going to end up looking like. And what the live competition is gonna bring for us, and to see how applicable like our not new training system but our remodeled training system ends up being. You know, we're another weird thing they did, which like I wasn't like thrilled. I mean, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm sounding like a hater now. I'm not a hater, even though anyone who knows me would definitely say that I am. We didn't have a leaderboard the whole time, so like we had no frame of reference for like where we were at, which was interesting in some good ways and some bad ways. I like watching the leaderboard. I like seeing scores come in. So we weren't able to gauge like what good and bad times were for workouts as it went. And which honestly I think took a lot of pressure off of them. It just meant like I'm gonna go out there and do my best effort and not worry about the times that I've been seeing or this and that, which I think played out great in a lot of ways. Like I think it went really well for that reason. The other thing we still don't have is we don't know where the cut line is. Like, I know that we had a top 20 team, or you know, we have like some top 20 teams, but like I don't know how many teams are taking. We got one in the 40s and then like one in the 80s, and we don't know where the cut line is. And the reason it's important is BCS has taken, I think, like 60 or 80 teams per division before. So, like, it's the difference between, like, okay, are we sending, like, 5 teams or 6 teams, or are we sending, like, 8? Which is, like, again, it isn't that big of a difference, but I'm, like, I'm just curious what the gap is and, like, what to expect. And maybe it's more like selfish endeavor of like I'm on one of those teams, so I'm like, am I gonna, mainly big thing for me is like that weekend, am I gonna be coach and athlete, or am I just gonna be coach, or like it's just, again, it's just like information we don't have, which I thought was weird because in the past like they've told us up front like how many they're taking. And I don't know if that's because of like financial stuff or like, level of participation this year in the past or things like that. I think some of it has to do with like they ran a semifinal this year, like they ran the Mayhem Classic. So, and it went on right before the BCS Classic qualifiers was. So I'm wondering if they just got like overextended with like running both of these things kind of back to back or something like that. But it is what it is. So, we'll find out soon, I think, how many teams they're taking. I think they're just like sending out a wave of invites and maybe not telling anyone who the cut line is. I think they're sending out a wave of invites, and then next week they're going to send out another wave of invites, and then that's it. And that second wave will be based on like who says yes or no in the first wave. But I'm curious to how many they're going to send. I'm super interested to see. But I guess we'll find out. But yeah, this has been a fun, like, it was a big reminder of like why I love coaching in general. Like, I love being on the competitive side of things. But it's been a really, really fun qualifier. And it's always so rewarding to see your athletes succeed and make themselves proud. Like the reactions of their placements after was such a like cool moment, because I got to see some of them in like real time, and like it's hard to explain. Like it's like being a parent in a weird way. Not that I'm a parent or would know, but like I would imagine it's similar to like, finding out you made it into a college or so. I don't know what the right like metaphor for it would be, but seeing them happy with their work and that it's paid off for something is really cool and really unique, and is my favorite part of my job every single time. and like I think also for me as someone who is kind of out here on his own, like putting together a program and kind of figuring out as I go, it was really, really satisfying in a lot of ways to see people excited to compete, put in their best effort, feel equipped, be equipped, and then see their reaction to the results was like one of the more important experiences in my coaching career. I've had a lot, but this one was different in a way of like full transparency. Like I'm like I know what I'm doing, but when you're doing it in a vacuum, sometimes you question it, and you question yourself, and you question, it's a lot of responsibility. I have a bunch of people who they put their trust in me to get them to the places that they're going. And every now and again, it's nice to see that I might actually be good at my job, which, my athletes would yell at me if they heard me say this out loud, but it's rewarding. It feels good to not have to question myself after this one, to know that like, okay, what we're doing is working. So I'll leave you all with that, me being somewhat vulnerable for a moment. And the next stop on this is going to be seeing who qualifies. And, the more exciting part is this programming change, or like the way I run things change, was from January to May. And that is the exact same amount of time we have from now until the live competition. So I'm now really excited to see what kind of freaks I could send to the live competition. So we'll check back in on that as things go. But this has been me. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you on the next one. Thanks, y'all.